We're joined by Sibabalwe Sesmani, CEO of Unorthodox Group, a global communications and sports advisory company. Well, welcome to Africa at Play. I'm actually excited that I'm joined by a woman this time around.
Yay! Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm good. And just to begin the conversation, I mean, like, how significant are global sporting events in driving economic growth, most especially for its host nations?
It's massive. I mean, just the most obvious one would be just from the tourism aspect.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I couldn't make it to the FIFA World Cup. Better luck next time in 4 years' time. But just from watching that and watching the interactions, I mean, we live in a digital age, right, where people are on TikTok.
Sure.
Some of our sporting influencers were there, but a lot of South Africans that I was following were interacting with a lot of Mexicans and interacting with a lot of Americans. And just those conversations, you could see people really interested in coming into the country, but also Mexico as a whole. I was sitting at home and I'm busy thinking, I've never been to Mexico, but I would love to visit. I've never been to LA or Atlanta, but I would love to visit based on that. So it's got a huge tourism element to it that will far outlast the sporting event in itself. I mean, if we look at the vendors as well that can benefit from such a large sporting event on such a large scale, whether it's selling of merchandise, whether it's selling of food vendors,
Sure.
make quite a bit of money. So there is a whole economy around a sporting event. And it's also just smaller and minor cities that are within closer proximity of the stadiums. They also get to benefit from a tourism effect. Your game lodges, people also want to do activities. So even if we just look at tourism in itself, it is a huge driver of the economic impact that such large sporting events have.
Sure. And just before we unpack in-depthly on economic elements that, boost within the environment landscape, let's talk about, the athletes. Africa has consistently produced world-class athletes, but hosts relatively a few major sporting events. So why do you think why do you think the imbalance exists?
On my side, I think if we look at the greater parts of our continent, it is a bit of a structural issue.
Sure.
In South Africa, we hosted the 2010 World Cup successfully. We hosted the Netball World Cup in Cape Town successfully. The infrastructure was there. And now talks again of the Formula One, and they are saying that we will most probably use the Kyalami racetrack. And even that in itself, there are just a few minor touch-ups. But at any given point in time, that in itself is ready to go if they would say the Formula One is being hosted next year. The infrastructure updates or a few of the facelifts that would be had or need to be had would not be a lot. So South Africa in itself, if we look at the infrastructure, and because we've hosted large scale events, is ready. The problem then when we go to the rest of the continent is that the infrastructure is not necessarily on par. You want to put your best forward as a host country in any nation because you want people to come back. But even the ones that are watching at home, like ourselves, want to be there because of the ease of access. Because all of the visitors end up being ambassadors of that specific country, even though they are not residents of that country. So there are a lot of huge infrastructure issues that are to be dealt with. And there's also an ongoing conversation of we are currently exporting a lot of talent as Africans. I mean, if you look at our basketball, NBA, for instance, if you look at the NFL, there are a lot of West Africans in the NFL, but there isn't really a move in then trying to bring the NFL into Africa. Working on the infrastructure so that we can grow more athletes or actually have our own league. But with that said, there is actually NFL Africa that has started. Most of the activities are in North Africa. There is also NBA Africa that has set up its headquarters in South Africa, but has since set up another office in East Africa. I think I'm just not sure which country exactly it is, between Kenya, Rwanda, but they have also set up office there. So there is quite a lot that can be done with sports, but I would say that the biggest driver of infrastructure and us fixing our infrastructure is then saying what benefits are we reaping from the athletes that are being taken out of Africa, playing in those leagues. But it is up to those organizations to then say, how do we get more talent? How do we hone in on the talent and then come into Africa? But also ourselves as Africans do need to take accountability and take some certain level of growing our sporting economy and not just focusing on athletes. And we can't just be proud to say that we have an athlete playing in the NFL in America, for instance.
Sure. And also just interested to find out, just beyond tourism and hospitality, so which sectors does it benefit or does it touch on most importantly when a country hosts a major sporting event?
We did a symposium 2 to 3 years ago, which was called the Women in Sports Symposium. And it was all about educating women about the different careers within sport. So we looked at athletes. We had a few athletes come and joining us on the symposium, but we also looked at media production and careers in media production. I mean, now we see, I know in South Africa, there are a lot of sports influencers that are actually contracted by some of our big media houses. If we look at Supersport, I mean, Supersport in itself has had so many presenters going straight from the World Cup to the French Open and now Wimbledon. They have not come back home. So those presenting opportunities are there because there needs to be people at home at the studios, but also it's the fact that the media space is growing so much that we need those on-site presenters and also sports influencers to cover live. So the media part of it has grown. We also looked at the administration side of it. The administration side of it would be the sports psychologist. There is a huge gap there, especially when it comes to athletes. Unfortunately, we have observed that there is a player that was part of the Bafana squad who allegedly committed suicide because of depression. There is a huge gap when it comes to psychologists and therapists within competitive sport. It is normally left up to the athletes themselves to seek their own help as and when they feel as though they need it, but within those institutions and organizations, there isn't that. So there are those opportunities. There are opportunities in management and exec levels. There are opportunities in governing bodies. So when we host more events in our host countries, it actually opens up that ecosystem and creates more opportunities because you're now looking at the sporting infrastructure and the sporting ecosystem as a whole with a magnifying lens. And those opportunities are there because there is also an investment via a large event coming into a specific country or a host city.
Sure. Because of time, I wish we had, more time to actually unpack more onto this. But thank you so much for joining us. And that was Sibabalwe Sesmani, CEO of Unorthodox Group, just sharing her insights on the economic impact of global sporting events, as well as the opportunities they present for Africa.